The year was 1528, and the air was thick with fear. A deadly disease known as the sweating sickness had swept through England like a dark cloud, claiming lives with ruthless speed. One moment, a person could be laughing and healthy, the next they could be dead. No one was safe, not even the king himself. Henry VIII, the powerful and often temperamental ruler of England, was not one to take chances with his health. The mere mention of the sweating sickness sent shivers down his spine. When the news reached him that the disease had struck again, he acted swiftly. He dismissed most of his courtiers and servants, leaving only a handful of trusted attendants. Queen Katherine and Anne Boleyn, his current love interest, were among those who accompanied him as he fled from Greenwich Palace to the safety of Waltham Abbey in Essex. But even in Waltham, the sickness found a way to reach them. George Boleyn, Anne's brother, fell ill, and Henry, already on edge, became even more paranoid. He learned that one of Anne's maids had also contracted the disease. Without hesitation, he ordered Anne to be sent home to her father's estate at Hever, for fear that she might be infected. Henry, now alone and isolated in a tower at Hunsdon House, was a man consumed by worry. He couldn't bear the thought of losing Anne. Each day, his household grew smaller as more attendants were sent away, and he had his lodgings purged daily with fires and other preservatives to keep the sickness at bay. Meanwhile, the Boleyn family at Hever was in turmoil. Anne and her father, Thomas Boleyn, had fallen ill, and Henry, desperate to ensure her recovery, sent his personal physician, Dr. William Butts, to attend to her. But the sickness was not just a royal problem. It was a problem for everyone, and it struck without warning. On June 22nd, the disease claimed another victim, William Carey, the husband of Mary Boleyn and a trusted courtier. Mary, who was also at Hever, was devastated. William had not been with the king at Hunsdon. He had been dismissed from court earlier, along with many others, as Henry sought to avoid the contagion. Now William was fighting for his life, and Mary was left to watch and wait, hoping against hope that he would survive. The sweating sickness was more than just a physical threat. It was a psychological torment. People lived in constant fear, and even the slightest rumor could cause panic. The disease was a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, was immune to the whims of fate. As the days passed, the king's court remained in a state of chaos. Henry VIII, a man known for his grandeur and authority, was reduced to a figure of fear and isolation. The sweating sickness had changed everything, and the future was uncertain. Mary Boleyn, a woman caught in the crossfire of royal intrigue and personal tragedy, could only hope that her husband would pull through. The disease was relentless, but so was her love. And in the midst of the chaos, she held on to the hope that somehow they would survive. William Carey's sudden death from the sweating sickness shook the court. On a warm June day in 1528, he was one of the many who fell ill and died within hours. The news of his death must have been a shock to everyone, especially to his wife, Mary, and to the king, who had favored him greatly. Mary was probably at Greenwich with William and Thomas Heneage when the sickness struck. If anyone had the courage to help William, they would have followed the advice of the time. Keep him warm in bed, make him sweat, and give him herbal remedies or exotic potions, but nothing could save him. On Monday, June 22nd, 1528, William Carey, who was only 32, died. The French ambassador, Jean du Bellay, reported that many of the king's people, including William, died within a few hours of falling ill. Thomas Heneage, who was with William at the end, told Cardinal Wolsey that William had one last wish. He asked the cardinal to help his sister, Eleanor, become the prioress at Wilton Abbey. It seemed William wasn't sure if Eleanor would succeed in her bid to be the abbess, and he wanted to ensure she had some support. The king was deeply saddened by William's death, especially since his beloved Anne was also sick. Fortunately, Anne and her father recovered, but the sickness had claimed the lives of 3 of Henry's closest friends, including William Carey, Sir William Compton, and Sir Edward Poyntz. William's death left Mary in a difficult position. She was now a widow with 2 young children and no income. The lands and offices that William had held were taken back by the king, and Mary had no right to stay in the courtier lodging where they had lived. She was left with only the rents from William's Essex manor and an annuity from Tynemouth Priory. Mary reached out to her father, Thomas Boleyn, for help, but he refused to assist her. Some believe that Thomas only cared for his children, as long as they were useful to him. He might have seen Mary as a burden, especially since she was past 30 and might struggle to find another husband. Her past affairs, particularly with the king, may have also made her an embarrassment to the family. Despite her father's rejection, the king stepped in to help. He granted Mary an annuity of £100, which was a significant sum, to support her and her children. This was a generous gesture, and it suggests that Henry still felt some responsibility for Mary, possibly because of their past relationship. It also helped to please Anne, who was now the king's primary love interest. To further assist Mary, Henry gave the wardship of her son, Henry Carey, to Anne. This meant that Anne would manage Henry Carey's lands and income until he turned 21. While this relieved Mary of the financial burden, it also meant she had less control over her son's future. This might have caused tension between Mary and Anne, as Mary was now in a position of dependency on her sister. Mary's life at this time was described as being in bondage. She stayed at Hever Castle with her family, which included her father, her possibly estranged mother, her father's aging mother, and her young daughter, Katherine. It was not a happy household, and Mary likely felt trapped. She tried to save money for Katherine's dowry, knowing that a good dowry would help her daughter make a better marriage. Despite her new financial security, no one seemed interested in finding Mary a second husband. Her past reputation and the court gossip about her affair with the king may have deterred potential suitors. As the 1530s approached, Mary's situation remained unchanged, and she continued to live under her father's roof. Meanwhile, Anne Boleyn took up the cause of William's sister, Eleanor, who was still trying to become the prioress at Wilton Abbey. However, Cardinal Wolsey had sent a commissioner to the abbey, and it was discovered that Eleanor had a questionable past. She had admitted to having children with 2 different priests, and had even lived with a servant as his mistress. This revelation made it impossible for her to become the prioress, and the king, wanting to please Anne, ensured that neither Eleanor nor her sister, who also had a questionable reputation, would be given the position. The whole affair caused some tension between Anne and the king, as Anne felt that Wolsey had deliberately gone against her wishes. The king wrote to Anne to explain the situation, emphasizing that he would not compromise his honor or conscience by appointing someone with a poor moral record. In the end, a more suitable candidate was chosen, and the matter was resolved. Mary's life after William's death was marked by financial struggle, family tension, and a sense of being trapped. Despite the king's help, she remained in a difficult position, dependent on her sister and living in a household that was far from harmonious. Her story is a poignant reminder of the challenges faced by women in the Tudor court, especially those who had fallen from grace. Mary Boleyn lived a life that was often overshadowed by her more famous sister, Anne. After her first husband's death, Mary found herself at Hever, living on a pension from King Henry VIII. She was raising her daughter, Katherine, and dealing with the loss of her husband. During this time, Anne was rising in prominence, and the family's fortunes were soaring. However, Mary stayed mostly out of the spotlight, perhaps by choice or by the wishes of others. The Boleyn family's rise was meteoric, but Mary was a silent witness to it all. She wasn't mentioned much at court, and it seemed that her presence was not always welcome. After all, there were whispers about her past relationship with the king, which had been kept secret for years. As the controversy over Henry's divorce from Catherine of Aragon grew, these whispers turned into gossip. The new imperial ambassador, Eustache Chapais, noted in a letter that everyone was talking about the king's past with Mary. However, the extent of this gossip is likely exaggerated, as it wasn't widely recorded, and Henry's opponents didn't use it much to their advantage. In 1530, Thomas Boleyn was made Earl of Wiltshire, and Mary became known as Lady Mary Rochford. Her brother, George, also received a title, and the Boleyns were now among the most powerful families in England. Despite this, Mary's life remained relatively quiet. In 1530, Henry gave Anne Boleyn some money to redeem a jewel from Mary, suggesting that Mary was back at court and possibly part of Anne's household. The summer of 1532 was a significant turning point. Henry VIII decided to take Anne Boleyn to Calais to meet with King Francois I of France. Mary was one of the ladies chosen to accompany them. The journey was a grand affair, with more than 2,000 people in the royal party. They stayed at various places along the way, including at the house of Sir Christopher Hales, where they likely witnessed the nun of Kent, Elizabeth Barton, making prophecies against the king. The crossing to Calais was smooth, and the royal party was greeted with a grand welcome. Mary and the other ladies were housed in the Exchequer Palace, where they enjoyed a series of lavish events. One of the highlights was a masque where Anne and her ladies, including Mary, performed in elaborate costumes. Anne danced with King Francois, and the evening was filled with music, food, and entertainment. During this time, Mary may have met William Stafford, the man who would become her second husband. William was part of the king's retinue, and although he was not of noble birth, he and Mary developed a connection. However, their relationship did not progress immediately, as Mary was still part of the Boleyn family's ambitious plans. The storms that kept the royal party in Calais for an extra 2 weeks allowed Henry and Anne to enjoy what was essentially a honeymoon. Mary and the others joined in the festivities, and the idyll finally ended when they sailed back to England. They landed at Dover and made their way to Eltham Palace. In January 1533, Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII secretly married. Mary may have been present, but it's not certain. Anne's pregnancy was announced, and she was officially recognized as queen at Easter. Her coronation in June was a grand event, marking the height of the Boleyn family's power. Despite the family's success, Mary's role remained in the background, a quiet but essential part of the Boleyn story. Mary Boleyn, Anne's sister, found herself in a challenging position when Anne became the queen. Anne, now the most powerful woman in the kingdom, had a strict set of rules for her ladies-in-waiting. She wanted them to be virtuous and well-behaved, so she gave them prayer books and kept them busy with tasks like sewing clothes for the poor. Despite this, life at court wasn't all work and no play. There were still plenty of dances, feasts, and other fun activities. As the queen's sister, Mary probably enjoyed a higher status, but she didn't feel truly appreciated. Mary's presence at court might have been awkward for King Henry VIII. He had once been her lover, but now that he had broken away from the Catholic Church to marry Anne, he needed to make sure his marriage was beyond question. In 1533, Parliament passed a law allowing him to marry the sister of a former mistress, but this didn't stop people from gossiping. Some were even arrested for spreading rumors about Henry's past with Mary. When Anne was crowned queen, Mary was part of the grand procession. She rode in a chariot with other ladies, wearing a beautiful gown of scarlet velvet. However, Anne's coronation wasn't as joyful as it should have been. The crowd was silent and disapproving, and some even jeered at the sight of Anne's and Henry's initials entwined on the arches along the route. On September 7, 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. This was a huge disappointment for Henry, who had hoped for a son. Despite this, he arranged a magnificent christening for the new princess. Mary was probably one of the many ladies who followed in the procession, but she wasn't given any special role, which might have been a reflection of her tarnished reputation. Mary's daughter, Katherine Carey, was about 9 when Elizabeth was born. It's possible that Katherine spent the next 6 years in Elizabeth's household, which was set up at Hatfield Palace. This early closeness might explain why Elizabeth and Katherine had a strong bond later in life. For Mary, it meant being separated from her daughter, but this wasn't unusual for aristocratic families. Mary took comfort in knowing that her daughter was receiving the best education possible. By September 1534, things between Henry and Anne were getting worse. Anne had lost a baby, likely a son, which was another blow to Henry. He had already started having affairs again, and his passion for Anne was fading. This made Anne feel humiliated and angry. Things got even worse when Mary appeared at court, clearly pregnant. Anne was shocked and furious when Mary explained that she had secretly married William Stafford, a man of no great importance. Anne was horrified because she thought William was not good enough for her sister. William Stafford was a young, fit, and loyal courtier. He had been at Anne's coronation and might have met Mary there. They fell in love, and despite the risks, they decided to get married. William was a minor courtier, and his family had a history of treason, which made him even less suitable for Mary. However, Mary was happy to escape her unhappy widowhood and the control of her father. William's love and respect for her helped her feel better about herself. William's family was not wealthy, and he had little to offer in terms of status or land. His father, Sir Humphrey Stafford, had worked hard to restore his family's reputation after his grandfather was executed for supporting Richard III. Despite this, William was still seen as a nobody at court. He was a soldier and a gentleman usher to the king, but he had no lands to call his own. Despite this, Mary and William's love for each other was strong enough to overcome the challenges they faced. Mary Boleyn's life took an unexpected turn in the summer of 1534 when she married William Stafford, a young and humble soldier. The marriage was a bold and impulsive decision, driven by love rather than the political and social considerations that usually governed such unions in the Tudor court. For Mary, this was a chance to break free from the shadows of her family's expectations and find genuine happiness. However, the Boleyn family, particularly her sister Anne, who was now Queen of England, and her father, Thomas Boleyn, were outraged. They saw Mary's marriage as a disgrace and a threat to the family's rising status. The King Henry VIII, who had once shown favor to Mary, was also displeased. As a result, Mary and William were banished from the court, and the Boleyns cut off all financial support to Mary. Mary's letter to Thomas Cromwell, the king's principal secretary, reveals the depth of her despair and her determination to stand by her choice. She writes with a mix of humility and pride, acknowledging her mistake, but also expressing her love for William. Her words show that she had finally found a man who loved her for who she was, not for her family connections. Despite the hardship, she was content to live a simple, honest life with him. Mary's letter also highlights the deep emotional scars left by her family's treatment. She felt unloved and undervalued, and her marriage to William was a way to escape the suffocating control of her father and the coldness of her sister. Her plea to Cromwell is a cry for understanding and compassion, a request to be seen as a human being rather than a tool for the family's ambitions. Despite the family's disapproval, Mary and William remained resilient. They found a modest life together, away from the court's scrutiny. Mary's letter suggests that she had come to accept her new role, and was willing to work hard to rebuild her life. She even reached out to her family members, asking for their blessings and goodwill, though she knew it was a long shot. In the end, Mary's story is one of personal growth and the search for happiness in a world that often valued status and power over love. Her marriage to William Stafford was a courageous act of defiance against the expectations of her time. Though it brought her temporary isolation and hardship, it also gave her a sense of freedom and self-worth that she had never known before. Mary Boleyn's life, marked by both scandal and love, serves as a reminder that sometimes the most profound acts of bravery are the ones that challenge the norms of society and lead to true happiness. Despite the challenges, Mary found her own path and lived it with integrity and determination. Her story is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to find joy and fulfillment, even in the face of adversity.